GPS signal lost, announced Amanda Chen's phone as she sat in the back seat of the Uber, watching her navigation app spin helplessly while trying to locate their position in Washington, D.C.'s notorious traffic. She looked up nervously at her driver, expecting to pull over and wait for the signal to return. Instead, Carlos Rodriguez glanced briefly at the failed device, nodded calmly, and continued driving to the complex intersection with complete confidence. "Don't worry about the GPS, ma'am. I know exactly where we're going," he said, taking a route that Amanda's phone had never suggested but somehow cut to the traffic like he'd planned it for years. What Amanda didn't know was that the man driving her to Reagan National Airport was Carlos Rodriguez, former Green Beret, whose navigation skills had guided special operations teams through hostile territory across 3 continents, and for whom D.C. traffic was considerably less challenging than navigating Taliban-controlled mountains in Afghanistan. Carlos Rodriguez, 41 years old, had been driving for Uber in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area for exactly 18 months, maintaining a perfect 5.0 star rating and a reputation among regular passengers as the driver who always knew the fastest route, regardless of traffic conditions, construction delays, or GPS failures. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., Carlos performed the same pre-driving routine he developed during 15 years of military service. Inspect the vehicle systematically, check all fluids and tire pressure, clean windows for optimal visibility, and review the day's potential routes based on known traffic patterns, weather conditions, and scheduled events that might affect city traffic flow. The silver Honda Accord he drove was meticulously maintained, not because Uber required such standards, but because Carlos applied military vehicle maintenance protocols to civilian transportation. Emergency kit in the trunk, extra phone chargers, bottles of water, first aid supplies, and a detailed paper map of the region, backup systems for backup systems, the way he'd been trained. Passengers saw a professional, courteous driver who somehow always delivered them to their destinations faster than estimated arrival times. They appreciated his reliability, his clean vehicle, and his ability to navigate D.C.'s complex traffic patterns without the apparent stress that characterized most local drivers. What they didn't see was a constant situational awareness, the automatic route analysis, and the navigation skills developed through years of special operations missions where getting lost meant mission failure, and mission failure could mean death for entire teams. Carlos had served as a Green Beret for 15 years, specializing in reconnaissance and surveillance operations that required advanced land navigation capabilities. He led teams through unmarked terrain in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, and several countries that didn't appear on any official deployment records. Navigation had been more than just a job skill. It had been survival capability for himself and the soldiers under his command. His training had included everything from traditional map and compass techniques to advanced GPS systems, satellite communication equipment, and dead reckoning methods that allowed navigation without any technological assistance. But more importantly, he developed what military instructors called geographic intuition, the ability to read terrain, understand traffic patterns, and predict optimal routes based on comprehensive analysis of multiple variables. When Carlos retired from the Army, he'd initially considered careers that would use his military training more obviously: security consulting, law enforcement, or government contractor work. But after 15 years of high-stress operations, he'd chosen Uber driving specifically because it allowed him to use his navigation skills in a peaceful, helpful context while maintaining the flexibility and independence he'd missed during military service. The work was satisfying in ways he hadn't expected. Every successful trip was a small mission accomplished. Every passenger delivered safely and efficiently was a minor victory. Every route optimized for time and safety was an application of skills he developed in much more dangerous circumstances. Amanda Chen, 34 years old, was a software development director for a tech company in Arlington, Virginia. She used Uber regularly for airport trips because parking at Reagan National was expensive and complicated, and she preferred to work during the commute rather than deal with driving stress. Amanda had requested Carlos specifically because she'd ridden with him twice before and been impressed by professionalism and efficiency. Carlos always arrived exactly on time, helped with luggage without being asked, and somehow managed to navigate D.C. traffic with a calm competence that made the journey feel reliable rather than stressful. "Good morning, MS." "Chun," Carlos said as Amanda settled into backseat. "Reagan National, Terminal B, correct?" "That's right. Flight leaves at 10:15, so I should have plenty of time." "Yes, ma'am." Current traffic conditions show optimal routes through downtown rather than the highway. We'll have you there with time to spare. Carlos pulled away from Amanda's apartment building and began navigating through the complex network of streets that connect Arlington to central Washington. Amanda opened her laptop to review presentation materials for her business trip, trusting Carlos to handle the driving while she focused on work. 20 minutes into the trip, Amanda noticed something unusual. Carlos was taking routes that her GPS apps had never suggested, cutting through residential neighborhoods and side streets that somehow avoided the major traffic bottlenecks that typically made airport trips stressful. Carlos, how do you know about these shortcuts? My GPS never shows these routes. Experience, ma'am. I've been driving in this area for a while, and I've learned which routes work best at different times of day. What Carlos didn't mention was that his route selection was based on the same terrain analysis and traffic pattern assessment techniques he'd used for mission planning in special operations. He'd spent months after starting with Uber systematically exploring every street, alley, and alternate route in the metropolitan area, building mental maps that included not just directions but timing data, traffic flow patterns, and contingency options for various scenarios. Amanda was impressed but not particularly surprised. She assumed Carlos was just an experienced local driver who'd learned the city well through repetition. That assumption changed dramatically when they encountered an unexpected situation that revealed the true extent of Carlos's capabilities. A water main break on Independence Avenue had closed several major routes to the airport, creating massive traffic backups that weren't yet reflected in GPS systems. Cars were trapped in gridlock. Emergency vehicles were trying to navigate through the chaos, and most drivers were pulling over to wait for updated navigation instructions. Amanda's phone announced, GPS signal lost. Recalculating route. The screen showed the location as a blank space with no roads, no directions, and no estimated arrival time. Oh no, Amanda said, checking the time. Carlos, my flight leaves in less than an hour. Should we try a different route? Carlos glanced at the failed GPS device, assessed the traffic situation around them, and made a decision that demonstrated years of training in navigation under adverse conditions. MS. Chen, I'm going to take an alternate route that should get us to the airport on time. It's not a route that GPS systems typically recommend, but I know it well. Without hesitation, Carlos turned off the main road and began navigating through a complex series of residential streets, small connector roads, and service routes that most people didn't know existed. He drove with complete confidence, never slowing to check street signs, never hesitating at intersections, never showing any uncertainty about where he was going. Amanda watched in amazement as Carlos navigated through neighborhoods she'd never seen, across roads she didn't know connected to each other, around traffic obstacles that would have trapped other drivers for hours. Carlos, how do you know about these roads? This is incredible. Just experience, ma'am. But Amanda was beginning to suspect that Carlos's experience was more specialized than typical driving knowledge. His navigation was too precise, too confident, too systematic to be the result of casual familiarity with local roads. When they encountered a police checkpoint that was directing traffic away from the airport access road, Carlos spoke briefly with the officer in a way that suggested familiarity with law enforcement procedures. Officer, I need to get my passenger to Reagan National for a 10:15 flight. What's the current status of alternate routes? The police officer provided information about road closures and traffic conditions, but also asked Carlos, are you local law enforcement or emergency services? Former military, sir. Just trying to help my passenger make her flight. The officer waved them through with directions to a service road that bypassed the main traffic backup. Amanda was now certain that Carlos's navigation skills were the result of more than just driving experience. Carlos, when you said former military, what kind of military service did you do? Carlos hesitated, the way he always did when passengers asked about his background. Army, ma'am. 15 years. What was your job in the Army? Another pause. Special operations. Navigation and reconnaissance. Amanda suddenly understood why Carlos could navigate D.C. traffic with such confidence. You mean like Green Berets? Yes, ma'am. The conversation that followed revealed the extent of Carlos's military background. 15 years as a Green Beret, multiple deployments to combat zones, specialized training in land navigation and terrain analysis, and experience leading teams through some of the world's most dangerous and complex environments. Carlos, that's incredible. But why are you driving Uber? With your background, you could probably work for the government or military contractors. Carlos considered how to explain his choice. Ms. Chen, after 15 years of high-stress operations, I wanted work that let me use my skills to help people in peaceful situations. Driving allows me to apply navigation and planning skills without the life-and-death pressure of military missions. But isn't this kind of step down from special operations? No, ma'am. It's a different kind of service. Every trip is a small mission. Get passengers to their destinations safely and efficiently. Every route I plan helps someone accomplish their goals. It's meaningful work, just different from military missions. Amanda was struck by Carlos's perspective on his transition from elite military service to civilian work. She'd assumed that someone with Green Beret training would seek high-profile careers that matched the prestige of special operations service. Carlos, do other passengers know about your background? Not usually. Most people don't ask, and I don't volunteer information about military service unless it's relevant. But your skills are obviously much more advanced than typical driver training. The navigation principles are the same whether you're leading a team through enemy territory or driving through D.C. traffic. Analyze the terrain, identify optimal routes, plan for contingencies, execute with confidence. They arrived at Reagan National Airport 17 minutes before Amanda's flight departure time, despite the water main emergency that had created citywide traffic chaos. Carlos helped with her luggage and wished her a safe trip. Carlos, I have to ask, was that route you took something you learned in the military? The specific route was from civilian driving experience, but the navigation techniques, the ability to analyze traffic patterns and terrain, the confidence to navigate without GPS, those are skills I developed in the Army. Amanda's flight was delayed by 30 minutes due to air traffic control issues, which gave her time to reflect on her conversation with Carlos. She realized she'd been driven by someone whose navigation skills had been developed for situations far more challenging than airport commutes. When Amanda returned to D.C. 3 days later, she requested Carlos for her airport pickup. During the ride, she asked more questions about his military service and his transition to civilian work. Carlos, I've been thinking about our conversation. Your military experience obviously gives you capabilities that most drivers don't have. Have you considered using those skills in other ways? What do you mean? I mean consulting work, training programs, or other jobs that would recognize your specialized background. Carlos had considered those options, but his experience with transition programs and veteran employment services had been disappointing. Many employers wanted to hire veterans, but didn't understand how to apply military skills to civilian contexts. Others offered positions that required security clearances and high-stress environments that reminded him too much of his military service. I've looked into other work, but I've found that civilian employers either don't understand military capabilities or they want to use them in ways that recreate the stress and pressure I was trying to leave behind. Amanda, whose tech company was always looking for employees with problem-solving skills and ability to work under pressure, had an idea. Carlos, would you be interested in talking to my company about consulting work? We do logistics software for transportation companies. Someone with your navigation and routing expertise could help us design better algorithms. The conversation led to Carlos meeting with Amanda's development team to discuss how military navigation principles could be applied to civilian transportation software. The consulting work allowed Carlos to contribute his expertise to projects that improved efficiency and safety for civilian drivers, while maintaining his flexibility to continue Uber driving. Carlos's military navigation techniques proved valuable for software development in ways that surprised Amanda's team. His understanding of terrain analysis translated into better routing algorithms for urban environments. His experience with contingency planning improved software reliability for situations like road closures and traffic emergencies. Carlos, said Amanda's colleague Mike Patterson after a consulting session, your approach to route optimization is completely different from typical software engineering. You think about navigation like it's a tactical operation, because it is, in a way. Every route involves analysis of multiple variables, assessment of risks and opportunities, and execution of a plan that accomplishes the mission safely and efficiently. The consulting work led to additional opportunities. Carlos began teaching navigation techniques to emergency services personnel, helping police and fire departments improve their response time optimization. He developed training programs for rideshare drivers who wanted to improve their route selection and customer service skills. But Carlos continued driving for Uber, both because he enjoyed the work and because it kept him connected to the practical application of his navigation skills. 6 months after meeting Amanda, Carlos received a phone call that connected his current work with his military service in an unexpected way. Carlos, this is Major Jennifer Walsh from the Army Special Warfare Center. I understand you've been doing consulting work on transportation logistics. We're developing new training programs for special operations navigation, and we need someone with your combination of military experience and civilian application. The Army was updating its land navigation curriculum to include urban environment challenges and civilian infrastructure analysis. Carlos's experience applying military navigation principles to civilian transportation made him uniquely qualified to help design training that prepared special operations personnel for both military and civilian contexts. Carlos accepted the training development position while continuing his Uber driving and civilian consulting work. The combination allowed him to contribute to military education while maintaining the peaceful application of his skills that had drawn him to civilian transportation work. Amanda, who had become both a regular passenger and a friend, noticed a change in Carlos's satisfaction with his work. You seem more energized lately, more integrated, like you've found a way to use all your experience constructively. Carlos realized that Amanda was right. Instead of compartmentalizing his military experience or abandoning his specialized skills, he had found ways to apply them across multiple contexts: civilian transportation, software development, emergency services training, and military education. I think I've learned that transition from military service doesn't require choosing between using your skills or abandoning them. It requires finding ways to apply those skills that align with your values and life goals. A year after their first airport trip, Amanda was promoted to vice president of her tech company, partially based on success of transportation software that incorporated Carlos's navigation expertise. Carlos had become the company's primary consultant for logistics optimization and was regularly invited to speak at technology conferences about applying military problem-solving techniques to civilian challenges. But Carlos still drove for Uber 3 days a week, still maintained his perfect rating, and still helped passengers navigate D.C. traffic with a confidence and competence that had first impressed Amanda. During one of their regular airport trips, Amanda asked Carlos about his perspective on the relationship between his military service and his civilian work. Carlos, do you think your current work is as important as what you did in the Army? Carlos considered the question carefully. It's different, but not less important. In the Army, I navigated teams through dangerous territory to accomplish military objectives. Now I help people navigate through civilian challenges to accomplish their personal and professional goals. The principles are the same. Use specialized skills to help others succeed safely and efficiently. Do you miss the excitement of military operations? Sometimes I miss the intensity and the brotherhood, but I don't miss the stress, the danger, or the moral complexity of combat operations. This work lets me apply the same skills in ways that help rather than harm, that build rather than destroy. Today, Carlos Rodriguez still drives for Uber in Washington, D.C., still maintains his perfect rating, and still navigates the city with skills developed through years of special operations training. But he's also a recognized expert in transportation logistics, a consultant for emergency services, and an instructor for military navigation programs. Passengers who ride with Carlos still benefit from his extraordinary navigation capabilities, even if most of them never learn about the military training that makes those capabilities possible. They experience reliable, efficient transportation provided by someone whose skills were developed in some of the world's most challenging environments. Carlos's story reminds us that military expertise doesn't diminish when applied to civilian purposes. It transforms. That special operations training can be used to help commuters reach airports just as effectively as it helped teams reach military objectives. That the same skills that ensure mission success in combat can ensure customer satisfaction in civilian service. The next time you ride with a driver who seems unusually skilled, remember Carlos Rodriguez. Remember that they might have navigation experience gained in places and situations you can't imagine. Remember that they might have chosen transportation work not because they lack other options, but because they found meaning in applying extraordinary skills to ordinary human needs. Sometimes the most important missions are the ones that get people to work on time, help families reach the airport for vacations, and ensure that passengers feel safe and confident during their journeys. Sometimes the greatest act of service involves not dramatic military operations, but daily choices to use specialized training to make civilian life a little bit easier and more reliable. We need to recognize and appreciate the skilled professionals among us who've chosen to serve quietly, especially those whose previous service required traveling to dangerous places, so that civilians could travel safely in peaceful ones. Because true expertise doesn't disappear when uniforms come off, it just finds new applications. And sometimes the most valuable navigation involves not finding paths through enemy territory, but finding ways to apply military training to civilian benefit, ensuring that the skills developed for war can be used to improve peace.